Congressman Scott Franklin is a Republican of Florida's 15th congressional district. He served in CENTCOM active duty following the events of 9/11 nearly 20 years ago. Congressman joins us now. Congressman Franklin, thanks a lot for taking the time. So some believe here that the Taliban will not reassociate with groups like al-Qaeda or the Islamic State, that this mature and pragmatic tone, as Clarissa Ward described it there, could really be here to stay, that this could be a different version of what ruled Afghanistan in the late 90s. Do you think that that's the case, or is the threat now somehow escalated? How do you read this?
I wouldn't buy into any of that. The Taliban has always shown who they are. In fact, even recently, they've still conducted school bombings. They've killed children. This is just their effort right now to try to get the heat off of them so that we will continue to leave as quickly as we have. But they're a bad organization, and we shouldn't expect anything less.
And the propaganda efforts have been fierce in even just the last few days. I do want to bring your attention to what many here in Washington called, of course, the DoHA Agreement. This was essentially signed by the Trump administration and leading Taliban figures, not with the Afghan government, it's worth noting here. But in that agreement, the Taliban agreed that it will, quote, not allow any of its members, other individuals or groups, including al-Qaeda, to use the soil of Afghanistan to threaten the security of the U.S. and its allies. That is what was agreed to upon, Congressman, by the Taliban in February of last year with the administration of former President Donald Trump. Do you believe that the Doha Agreement, as it was signed there, still holds true, or do we need to basically take what was agreed to there and throw it out the window because the rules have changed?
Well, I think by the Taliban's own example, the rules have changed. They've not honored the principles accorded into that agreement there. And I think we need to do whatever is required now to protect our American citizens, get them out of the country, and also get the people out that we've made promises to, that we would help them escape.
Of course, like I mentioned there a moment ago, the Afghan government did not sign the Doha Agreement last year. Was that a lot of people are saying, hey, that sort of, greased the runway to have what we had today? Was that a bit of a tacit admission that the Taliban had already willed, that their forces were so overwhelming that this was essentially inevitable, what we're seeing play out the last week?
No, I don't think it was inevitable. I think if we had exited in an orderly manner, had not given a firm deadline exactly that we would be out by September 11th. Everyone knows who spent time fighting in that part of the world. This is the toughest time of the year. This is when they like to fight. And yet we chose the absolute peak of the fighting season to do a rapid withdrawal.
And so for our viewers who are unfamiliar, why is this that most vulnerable part of the year, like you just mentioned there? Because I think that's interesting for people to know.
Well, it's actually one of the most inhospitable climates on Earth. And in fact, when I was assigned with CENTCOM early after 9/11, we didn't even have battle plans for a large part of that section of the world, because we never really envisioned that we'd be fighting wars there. It's a very difficult climate to fight in, and the winters are brutal, and they hunker down and live in caves for much of the fighting during the winter, and then they come out in the spring and the summer to do their fighting.
According to the Department of Defense and the Pentagon here, Congressman, they estimate anywhere between 5,000 to 10,000 Americans still in or around the area of Kabul. What needs to be taken into consideration to make sure as many people, not just Americans, but our Afghan allies there as well, are able to leave in as safe and as quick and appropriate a process as possible?
Well, we need to do whatever it takes to get those citizens out safely. And I think we need to communicate that clearly to the Taliban, that we will allow no interference there, and we will use everything at our disposal to get them out. We've had to fight our way into that country before. Unfortunately, we've walked away. We surrendered Bagram. We surrendered a tremendous amount of military equipment and hardware. But if we have to go back in, if that's what's required to get these citizens out, we have to be committed to doing that.
Congressman, I always think back to the 2001 AUMF. It has been used by White Houses, Democrat and Republican alike, to justify military strikes on a handful of other countries that it was never originally designed for. That includes Afghanistan. Does it bother you that members of Congress have never technically authorized military operation in a country like Afghanistan, and yet all these decades later, here we still are?
Well, and that's something that's being looked at now in Congress, looking at those AUMFs. I agree. I think over time, too much power, authority has been ceded to the White House, of whichever side of the aisle we're talking about, whichever administration. I think we need to bring that back to Congress. That's where that authority rests in the Constitution, and I think that needs to be restored.
You are on Armed Services Committee. What hearings need to be called? What are your most outstanding questions, Congressman, that you need answers to?
I really want to know why President Biden thought that this was not one of the possible options, one of the outcomes. When he stood there and said, this is not going to be a Saigon moment. You will not be seeing helicopters evacuating. You won't see Kabul fall, and yet it did. I want to know, did he get bad advice from his military leaders, or did he disregard it? But I think heads need to roll. It's inexcusable. We've invested far too much blood, talent, and treasure over these 20 years. And as a result, the world now is a much less safe place. It's dangerous, and not just for all the travesty in Afghanistan. It's just horrible on so many different levels. But our potential adversaries and real adversaries out there are watching very closely, whether it's China, the Soviet, or Russia now. I'm an old Cold War guy, but the Russians have regained their position militarily. You've got North Korea that will be watching this closely, as will be Iran. They're already migrating, moving troops out of Syria back into Afghanistan again. So today, the world is much more dangerous than it was, and I think it's because of this really ill-conceived, disastrous escape plan that we've done here.
Of course, and you mentioned the politics of it. Democrats, I have not seen Democrats in Washington try and demand answers and accountability from this White House on any issue up until now quite as forcefully as they are doing. Florida Congressman Scott Franklin, you're welcome back on the show anytime. Good luck, sir. Thanks a lot for being here, Representative. Nice to have you.